Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And we are coming to you from Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. I can't believe we've made it.
Yeah. We're at CPI, Conservative Policy Institute, and is hosting us. But today we've got an old friend of mine, Russ Vought, who we've known each other, I don't even want to say. It's been a long time. So Russ was a key player at the Republican Study Committee back many years ago.
Back in the day.
Back
When you were just young children.
We were kids. I mean, literally. But in fact, I think it was Sheila. We were celebrating my 30th birthday.
Oh, that is a long time ago.
And there was someone got black balloons, and Sheila's like, "Wow, you look pretty good for 40." She thought I was turning 40.
Well, because you already had gray hair. I'm
yeah,
sure.
That's true. Because Shada gave me gray hair, as Russ can attest. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. That was a long introduction.
That's
what we do.
Russ is just going back and forth. When it's going to come to me?
No, I've been thinking old memories about how awesome those jobs were, because you literally get paid when you're an RSC staffer.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Now it's really more the House Freedom Caucus, but you got paid to get the members bullets and ammunition to the members that actually wanted to fight and be engaged in the battle. So, what more can you ask for as in your 20s and early 30s?
Right, as an ideologue, right? Well, and that was one of the things. I didn't get this per se because I was on the personal staff, but you got to basically staff a whole raft of members, and really the ones that were the most committed, the ones that cared. Yeah. You didn't have to try to convince someone to do something. They wanted to do it, so you gave them
you're kind of like their sentinels for a fight that should be occurring, and then you're get them the bullets. And they also tend to be the most talented members of the Republican conference, and so you're not giving them talking points. You're not sitting there wasting your time, right? You're giving them, here's the legal memo for what you need to be able to win a debate with a parliamentarian, or here's the amendment, or here's some weaponry in terms of a line of argument, and it's fun. And I think that we've, in some respects, are regaining that fight that I think has laid dormant for too long, real honestly, for a while, in that members have lost other members to learn from when they get here about how to fight. And if you've never been through one, that's why I love the 20s so much, is they've been through this paradigm shifting battle. And if you talk to them now, and if we're in Arizona, Eli Crane or someone like that, I mean, Andy Biggs, they have so much confidence now to take on the system. Right. And that's how you create statesmen that are not defined by the Washington Post, but are defined by what's necessary to save the country.
Yeah, well said. Perfectly summed up. That's great. What has changed from when you were at our staffing RSC, or the head running RSC? Because you were there for how many years were you at RSC?
I guess I came 2004 to about 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, 2009. Okay. So.
All right. So you were there with Shadig, Pence.
Shadig was a very robust member, but I didn't serve under him as chairman. So right? Myrick was my first chairman, and Hensling was my last chairman.
Hensling, okay. And what's changed between then and now? And like you said, it's getting better now, but there was a big gap. Maybe when you left RSC.
I think that, like I said, both in the Senate, and really particularly so in the Senate. In the House, there was still a fight at the member level. The Mark Meadows, the Jim Jordans are coming on. They created the HFC in the aftermath of kind of leadership imposing over the heads of the founders, to use an RSC technical term.
Right.
Control of the RSC, the HFC rises up, and those members were in the fight. But I think at the staff level, there has been a huge fade in terms of staffers that we meet weekly to get their bosses in the fight. And remember, we used to have those weekly meetings.
Yep.
And there was an esprit de corps, what stays in Fight Club, stays
right.
in Fight Club. And so that has largely vanished really until Conservative Partnership Institute has come along and rebuilt the cadres of staffers that these members can then trust. You don't have any situations where a member takes a fight on against leadership and next thing they lose their staff, right? That's changing, and that's good. In the Senate, when we lost some of the lions like DeMint and Phil Graham, and Mike Lee's been great throughout all of this, but he's been so alone.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz and others been a handful, and I think what they lost when they lost like a Graham, who and I worked for Graham. That was actually my start as a 24-year-old doing policy for him, and he was retiring, so everyone above me was leaving, and so I got a chance before the RSC to be doing, some major procedural things on the Senate floor. When you lose a person like that acts unilaterally and decisively, you don't know it can be done. And you don't know that you don't need to go talk with leadership. And that's coming back over time. And it's exciting to see. I think that's where you build. Because my view, and I've been telling folks this in the aftermath of the debt limit deal, we save the country if the Army's on the field. The Army is the grassroots across the country, but it is represented in the halls of Congress by your Senate Steering Committee and your House Freedom Caucus, and now really to a large extent the 20. If that group is alive and fighting and picking real fights and building the battle and having people come on and add to their numbers, the fight is alive. It ends when they say it ends, when the American people say it ends. And so I'm excited right now where we are, even in the aftermath of a pretty big setback on the debt limit deal. I think we're building, we're moving, and I think it's in a good place.
Yeah. So speaking of the debt limit deal, so that obviously people like you and some of the members wanted to get more. I've made the argument that, hey, you know what, from where the Biden administration started, it was a win. I mean, it wasn't everything we wanted, but I would still call it a win. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I just think that I'm not looking at it from red team, blue team. Like,
okay.
I would say if you're,
of course, you're being more nuanced because you're smarter than me. But
if you're looking at, did they move the White House to the historical perspective of forcing the negotiations? Yes, but in terms of the magnitude of what's needed to save the country in this moment, I would say it was a massive missed opportunity, because I was looking at it from the standpoint of Joe Biden, and it's always based on what your assumption is on the art of the possible. And my assessment of that moment was that Joe Biden had to get this debt limit done. He would have taken many, many things if they had stuck to their guns. And for the first time, honestly, since I've been in this town, Sean, is we had, up until a moment, we had House leadership actually governing as if John Shadegg was the Speaker of the House.
Wow.
And that's paradigm shifting, because he had conservatives at the table. No one thought all these people would call, can conservatives, will they ever vote for a debt limit? Yeah, they'll vote for a debt limit if it serves the interests of the American people. They passed one out of the House, massive $4 trillion in cuts. Right. And what was interesting about that is that the parameters of what passed the House was largely similar to the parameters of past debt limit deals that even Joe Biden had negotiated. So there was nothing that would stop Joe Biden agreeing to it. And my view of the Senate was the Senate will adopt anything that Joe Biden agrees to. The filibuster in this respect is largely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was looking at it.
Good point. Okay. Well, that's a fair assessment. And like I said, you are smarter than I am. This is a former Office of Management and Budget director. Sure. I mean, it's like not a small thing. So talk to us a little bit about that experience. I mean, when you were named for that, I was so thrilled because I was like, I know that guy.
Yeah.
I've never known an OMB director. Which is kind of cool, because I was a budget staffer for Shadegg when he was originally on the, first got elected. He was on the budget committee. And so I can remember the OMB director coming to the budget committee, and, at that time it was Clinton and it was a bunch of garbage. But so what was that like?
In many respects, it was a dream come true as a budget staffer, and I think honestly, I was preparing for that job when we were working as budget staffers. To think through and be mentally prepared for how you would use that office, but you want to get to OMB at some point. And there were opportunities before that, but I never wanted to leave the fight, and I felt that the fight was primarily in the House and the Senate at the time for my skill sets and my passion, really, until Donald Trump becomes elected. And then you have an opportunity for paradigm shifting work, someone who's going to actually rattle the cage of the administrative state, and I wanted to help. I did not expect to be put up for those jobs, and God had favor on me, and we wanted to use every opportunity to be good stewards of the positions that we were given, and we had fun along the way. But it gave me a great opportunity for a number of fronts. Number one, to know as a principal how these jobs, what are the different pressures that you're under, so that when you go to the Hill and say, you know what, you can take this fight and win, you can now do it from the standpoint of having rolled out a presidential budget in an election year and knowing that if you mess up, there are some pretty significant consequences to it. But it also gives you a sense of no better vantage point for the administrative state. The arguments that come at you from the institutionalist, but also exactly mechanically what's necessary to win. And you can't just pick the fight. You got to have the implementation and the credibility to know how to execute, and to execute under withering fire from the enemy. And you can. That's the hopeful aspect of it. Is someone like Bob Lighthizer, Jim Bridenstine, Ken Cuccinelli. We were executing under withering fire. Mark Morgan, and so it can be done. And now my goal and passion is to prepare the legal paradigms, the policy paradigms, and the manuals to be able to give an army of these kind of folks the plans to do it. Because I find, personnel is policy, but you can take the best personnel and put them in a place, and they have no ability to know what to do about it.
Right. Well, and I think that a lot of people, you talk about OMB, everyone thinks budget, but it's like literally the entire federal government.
It's all budgetary questions, all regulatory questions, and all of government execution. And so if the president has multiple agencies trying to build a wall, that's an OMB quarterbacking thing. And you just in a perfect world, and I put this in a chapter for the Heritage Mandate, in a perfect world, the OMB director is the best representative of commander's intent, of what the president thinks on government-wide every policy questions. Because you're not just Domestic Policy Council, you're not just NSC, you're not just NEC, and you're not just the little silos of the 8 cabinet agencies. You should be the best. And what happens is OMB often gets sidelined because they're always the efficiency people. Oh, we can't afford that. And I found that the way to serve President Trump was to ask that second, what are you trying to do? Game on, let's try to do it. Now let me figure out how the best way to do it. And then you have the trust level that you're not trying to take him down to a cul-de-sac.
You don't start with no, you start with
correct.
Okay, how?
Correct.
Right.
I think your chief of staff is your number one from a political perspective of managing all of the different atmospherics. Your OMB director is that central implementer of the president's agenda.
Do you think that OMB directors of the past have been, you were obviously well-tooled and prepared, and
my mentor had been deputy director. Multiple people had served as program associate director.
So but I feel like there's been a lot of people who've been OMB directors who really weren't up to the task, that they weren't the quarterback of being able to actually implement.
Well, they probably didn't see the breadth of opportunities in terms of the way you described it. And one thing that I think President Trump doesn't get enough credit for, and probably you can speak to this, is dismantling the regulatory state.
Right.
I've been in several different meetings where people will say, well, he did great on taxes, but he did much, much more on dumping getting regulations off business, off the population, which unfortunately we're seeing a flood of those come back. Can you comment on that and talk
Absolutely.
about that?
I mean, you knew that he was always going to have a strong appetite for deregulation, and he put certain things in place that helped us. 2 for 1 that we turned into 5 or 6 for 1.
Exactly.
But
I couldn't remember the name of it, but I remember that directive going out.
Yeah, and he really understood the need to deconstruct the administrative state, and over time was figuring out how to do that. There's an answer.
Yeah, when you talk about draining the swamp, that's really what you're talking about.
Exactly, and you've got to be able to put your hands in the glove. And I think one of the challenges we have right now is that we have, in some respects, misdiagnosed the administrative state as either an Article I Congress problem or just, an executive issue. Like, we have a merge. So the administrative state basically works for Congress. Doesn't work for the House Freedom Caucus, right?
Right.
They work for the committee chairman and the leadership, the committee barons. So it is Woodrow Wilson's entire vision of congressional government that you would see in the UK. We just don't talk about it that way. There was never a constitutional amendment. It is a merge. And so why doesn't the president he has legal authority but not de facto authority unless he knows exactly what to do with it. But the agencies they get their assignments of writing the laws behind closed doors, except for the committee barons that call, and then they get their funding from the agency. So they're entirely oriented that way. So it's not really just, hey, Article 1, we need to reclaim. It's a little more complicated than that. But from the standpoint of deconstructing it, you've got to be able to understand that and then reclaim it where you can. And the president was locked in on that. We were in the middle of an impeachment battle. And the reason why OMB is so important is we have statutory tools to turn money off, call it apportionment.
Yeah.
And Congress was trying to take our authority away over the Ukraine thing. And when we went into the Oval Office and said, Mr. President, this impacts your ability to manage the bureaucracy, he's like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. Vetoes, threats, the bill, we get it out. He did that in the middle of the impeachment process on that issue. I mean, that's
right.
Who does that, right? But can you imagine an OMB director that doesn't understand the apportionment? I think we had a lot of them, right? I asked, well, why does DOD not listen to us? Everyone else listens to us. Why doesn't DOD listen to us? And then I did an investigation, and we'd never used our apportionment authority for decades.
They don't listen to you because they didn't know you existed.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've got to be able to know you've got tools, know how to use those, and then manage the political aspect of you making a decision and making that decision stick, because if the decision doesn't stick, your own people don't want you to use it.
And what you're describing is, from a conservative standpoint, from someone who's been around this for a long time, you're describing what we've been talking about here in the last couple of podcasts, is the willingness to do the work. And what you described earlier with the different senators who are now, corralling around different ideas and running the Senate differently, they're willing to do the work.
Yeah.
Tommy Tuberville, willing to do the work, take the slings and arrows. J.D. Vance last week, willing to do the work. As limited as the work might be, as limited as the scope is in terms of their power, but willing to do the work and execute accordingly.
Yeah, policy, process, and politics are infused, and most of our guys, allies or members that might come here and want to do something but are not willing to do the work, are often one of those.
Yeah.
And so you've got to infuse that, get in the weeds, and be able to then win the debate at a number of different levels, to the country, to your colleagues, to the mechanical ministers of government power. These are all different arguments, and what I found in the executive branch is that the degree of complexity and minutia is so high that the conservative movement is largely unprepared for that. And so you then have to rely on your staff, if you don't just figure out how to get up to speed in such a way that that's how they get us, our best guys. Our best guys go in there and are like, kind of the deer in the headlights look, and that's not the right posture. You've got to come at it and say, I'm going to micromanage the heck out of this beast, and to do it from that perspective, and get smart and slow it down until you're ready to make a decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the experience you had at OMB is one that should be replicated in the future, obviously, by any future OMB directors. What are you doing now that you've gained that experience, and how do you move forward?
Well, we're at Center for Renewing America. We started it the week after the administration. It's designed to keep the fight on the issues that I think are most important, which have largely not been focused on by the conservative movement and kind of the main organizations here in D.C. And we've largely focused on issues where it's been okay in polite society to talk about it, and I'm fine on all those issues. Like, I love a tax cut. I was the president's economic deregulation czar, but those don't get you eliminated or called you a racist or a bigot. And yet those cultural issues about what keeps us together as a nation are the most important issues, and the left has been relentless on it. So we're constantly trying to focus the fight, the agenda setting process on those issues. We think that those will bear a higher opportunity to win politically. You look at Virginia governors after we've been talking about critical race theory for a year, and the president asked me to do stuff against critical race theory training in the federal government, and you have other luminaries like Chris Rufo out there talking about it for an entire year. And then for the first time, a kind of an establishment-leaning politician leans into the cultural fight, and you have an opportunity to bring independents that you never would have thought of, that literally don't care about the tax cut, and win not a purple state, a blue state.
Right.
And I think more of that. Now, the risk and the reason why the cartel doesn't like that is it's risky.
Yeah.
Right? You could have a situation where someone says the wrong thing in debate, but it's also risky for them. Terry McAuliffe screws up and says he doesn't want teachers at the table.
Yep.
So politics is risky. Parents at the table. Politicians.
He wanted all the teachers at the table.
Politics is risky. We're not gonna save our country without confrontation, and so we're constantly trying to put the focus on these cultural issues and then give them a way to implement. So we feel like if we say that you can do this, then you can do it, because Ken Cuccinelli told you could do it, and he's a former attorney general, and he's telling Doug Ducey or any of the candidates that were running at the time for Arizona governor, you can declare this an invasion, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, and it can be done. And so that was one of our biggest early initiatives. Was we knew Biden was never going to enforce the budget or the border. We have a solution of the Constitution. We've got to get Republican border states to do it. And, we've gotten the debate to the level, and Abbott continues to say he's doing it. We're testing, is he actually doing it? But he's taken our concept and he said, I had the legal authority to do it.
And he's the only one that's done it, right?
He is only the one that has declared the invasion.
Okay.
But then now his execution is where he's getting out of actually doing it. Yeah. We're saying interdict and remove yourself under its own portion of the Constitution, not federal immigration law that requires you to hand them over to the CBP.
Right. Interesting.
Well, you got a lot of stars on your roster here between Ken Cuccinelli and Dan Caldwell and Wade Miller. And
yeah,
I've known some of those guys for a while.
Yeah, no, and that we're encouraged by that. We feel like folks are getting out of bureaucracies and attracted to the fight and run to the sound of the gun. Those are the people that we're trying to recruit.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, it's nice to see another group that wants to train up conservatives in how to best fight in the culture. Mm-hmm. Because it seems like, as believers especially, the culture is just coming at us all the time.
Well, so that's one of our main our pillars, the for God, for country, for community, because we largely have the viewpoint that where we've gone wrong as the right, and as a result the country, is that we've been too secular, too imperialistic, and too individualistic in the sense that we've divorced individuals from their community. So we love our rights, but we've lost the fact that just laws are important, and healthy communities allow for people to to flourish and use and enjoy their liberties. And so we're always trying to correct on one of those. Like we went through when was the last time you saw anyone on the right say that they're a believer and argue from the premise of truth as we know from Judeo-Christian worldview based on the scripture, largely divorced from our politics.
Yeah.
Except if your name is Mike Pence.
Except your name is Mike Pence.
If your name is Mike Pence, pretty much every interview.
So we're trying to say, look, we have religious liberty in this country, but we got to have a premise that we're a Christian nation, and there is 1,000 years of Judeo-Christian worldview that's part of Western civilization that we're built on. And we don't have that. We have no coherency as a country.
It's so great that you guys are touching on that because, I mean, the 3 pillars of this podcast, faith, freedom, free enterprise, but also it's what I talk to candidates about all the time. If you just run on those 3 pillars, you'll win.
Yeah.
If you're unabashedly, unapologetically focus on those 3 pillars as the issues you want to focus on in the campaign, returning faith to our communities, standing up for people of faith, talking about freedom and the freedom movement, and then the ability for businesses and people to act freely for their own self-interest.
No, I think I think we have a super majority out there. We don't do politics in the sense of we don't do candidates.
No,
but
of course.
From a standpoint of where the country is, I think there's a super majority of Americans out there that when we start talking about these issues in the right way, there's a revolution out there in favor of winning elections with new groups of people that are excited about that kind of agenda.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a thirst.
There's a thirst for truth.
Yeah,
and
and
truth is
actual,
rooted in
like,
those 3 pillars.
Not only truth, but like reality. It's like let's stop with the mind bending stuff. I mean, this 1984 Orwell would be astounded at how much he got wrong because it's worse.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just
well, and the leader of the free world is the gaslighter of the free world. We said that in another podcast earlier. And so when lies are continuously repeated in the hopes that they become truth, it just becomes a dark, dark place.
Mm-hmm. Well, Russ, how can people learn more about the Center for Renewing America and get in touch with you guys?
Yeah. Our website is americarenewing.com. They can get us on all the channels at AM Renew Center, or they can follow me simply at Russ Vought.
Which I suggest you do.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
Yeah, thank you for being
so much
here.
for being
Really
here.
appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
God
Take
bless.
care.